On the morning of August the 15th, 1967, the Peterson family awoke like any other day. They were a family of 10, with the youngest being aged only 1, and the oldest being James Peterson, the father, aged 47. As mentioned, it was a regular morning. They all woke up like any other day. However, this would unfortunately come to be the last morning that they would ever see, as this would be the day that they would come face to face with a man that would unfortunately take the lives of 9. Shell Lake, located in Saskatchewan, Canada, is a very small community and village located next to a lake, which up until the late 60s was barely on the radar of anyone. However, in 1967, people would come to know Shell Lake for something other than its tiny lake and calm nature. A man by the name of Victor Ernest Hoffman would be released from a mental hospital. He'd been originally put there due to often stating that he had been hearing voices and having hallucinations about the devil, as well as angels, since he was at the age of 6. And at the age of 10, he started to feel an impulse to cause harm and kill. When looking into his medical records, it was clear that investigators that he was mentally ill. He had been diagnosed with schizophrenia and later on discharged from hospital into his parents' care. And unfortunately, being put into his parents' care would lead him to commit one of the most heinous crimes in Canada. So to answer the question of what led him to commit such a heinous crime, it all comes down to him being basically mentally ill already. Actually, he'd been mentally ill since a young age, and since this was the 60s, mental health wasn't really taken that seriously or handled correctly. He wasn't treated in the most logical of ways. Rather, they would just give him shock therapy and give him tranquilizers to dumb down that feeling of what he has inside his mind, as the only way to really stop him from doing anything drastic. And after doing shock therapy and giving him medication, they simply just put him back into his parents' care, basically just hoping that all those bad thoughts would be something he wouldn't actually act upon. However, as you already know, it didn't turn out that way. Before the sunrise on the 15th of August in 1967, Victor Hoffman would leave his parents' home and drive aimlessly around rural roads. He did this for a while until he spotted a small white farmhouse located in a very small village by the name of Shell Lake, located almost 150 kilometers north of Saskatoon, but didn't know the people who lived there. He did not know who they were, he had never seen them before, he'd never been there before, and he had no direct connection to this location or the people living here. But something in him drove him to stop in this location. He told himself that, "This is it. This is where you have to go and do it." Inside of the house were 10 people in total. James Peterson, aged 47, who was a war veteran and a father, with his wife Evelyn, aged 42, also in the house. Both were just regular people living a regular Canadian farm life. This life, however, would get cut short as Hoffman arrived. Hoffman would enter the Peterson family's residence armed with a .22 caliber Browning pump-action repeater rifle. He proceeded to go after and shoot all of the family members one by one. The father, Mr. James Peterson, was shot inside the kitchen. He had been shot 11 times. His wife Evelyn and her 1-year-old baby boy were found in the backyard, and it was assumed that she had jumped out the window with the baby, perhaps to protect it. They'd also been shot. There's another 6 children left in the house, and at this point, Colin Peterson, aged 2, was shot. William Peterson, aged 5, was shot. Pearl Peterson, aged 9, was shot. Dorothy Peterson, aged 11, was shot. Mary Peterson, aged 13, was shot. Jean Peterson, aged 17, was also shot. All of them will be shot by Hoffman, and only one was going to survive the ordeal, and that would be 4-year-old Phyllis Peterson, aged 4. She did survive, actually, due to being tucked in between 2 of her sisters underneath some sheets. In an interview with the CBC News, Phyllis recalls that she remembers knowing there was someone in the house, but that she doesn't remember hearing any of those things happening. She doesn't actually remember the gunshots, perhaps due to the trauma.
Her memories of that August night in 1967 are fragments of feelings, the memories of a terrified 4-year-old.
Well, I remember knowing that there was someone in the house. I don't remember hearing Dad fought with him quite a bit. I don't remember hearing any of that. I don't remember any gunshots.
Victor Hoffman would later on dispute why he didn't shoot little Phyllis. He would at times claim he didn't shoot her because she had the face of an angel. However, this story can be disputed, actually, as little Phyllis was actually placed under the bedcloths between her two sisters, and that was the reason she was most likely not noticed by Hoffman, hence why her life was spared, mostly because he missed her. He didn't see her. And there it is. At this point, it was over. The crime had been committed, and all Hoffman did was leave the house, get back into his truck, and drove back to his parents' home in Liask, located about 60 miles southeast of the Shell Lake community. The weirdest and most disturbing part is that when he came back home, he just kept acting normal, like nothing had happened. He continued his day-to-day life as if nothing had occurred, as if he hadn't taken the lives of 9 people. While he was basking in the sunlight, there was a total nightmare left behind at the Peterson home. A nightmare that someone would eventually have to stumble upon. A nightmare that would leave anyone scarred and torn for life. And it wouldn't be too long before somebody did stumble upon this horrid scene. On the same day, a neighbor named Wildrew Lang, who was friends with Mr. Peterson and had arrived to the Peterson family's home to help out with farm duties during the morning, was unfortunately the first to spot the horrid situation. At first, nothing seemed out of the order. The house from the outside looked like any calm and nice household in Canada. Clothes hanging and drying off, and a boy's bike on the grass outside. However, when Mr. Lang entered the home, he came face to face with a horrible and disturbing reality. He then had to travel using Mr. Peterson's truck 3.7 miles, or about 6 kilometers, to get to the nearest telephone to actually be able to call the police to report the incident to them. And straight away, a manhunt would begin. When the police arrived, they essentially saw a horrible, horrible state. At first, the coroner thought it could have been a murder, suicide. But this was ruled out quickly after it was impossible to actually find the weapon used, so the search began. Police officers from the RCMP went on a massive manhunt and had to comb through tons of land and grass in search for any kind of lead. The scene was so horrid that even the family's dog was cowering and hiding with its tail underneath some bushes, not wagging that tail anymore, when police had actually arrived to the scene. But with the hard work of the RCMP, by the 19th of August of the same year, just a few days later, the police would actually go and arrest Victor Ernest Hoffman, aged 21 at the time, from his family's home and bring him in. Now, the reason they even went after Hoffman to begin with was after having a conversation with just a random local that knew the Hoffmans and that also knew of Victor Hoffman's condition of sorts. And after police went and had a conversation with him, they went to Victor and decided to actually take him in, as it seems like he could be the one behind the crime. Just the way he was answering, he seemed a bit too calm and calculated about it. And as described by officers, Hoffman just acted very calm. He was not even a bit scared of what was to happen with him. He would go on and then actually admit it and tell the police that he had done it, and that the reason for doing it was because the devil had told him to do it. And he would even go on and describe the devil as a tall, black, and having no genitals. Yeah, kind of a weird situation, but yes, he essentially described the devil. And that's the biggest reasoning for him doing all this. He kept using that as his reasoning, and he kept using that reasoning even till the day he died. He kept saying it. The devil made him do it, which is really strange. Now comes the actual sentencing. The court decided to rule out prison for Hoffman, and he was instead found not guilty by the reason of insanity and put into a mental hospital in North Battleford, where he was once more diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. And he would spend most of his time from this point forward in a Ontario mental institute, but would get granted actually supervised access to the towns of Penatugushini, Port Nicole, and Midland in Ontario, something that actually would cause a lot of people to get angry, as the hospital had not actually informed the local police of Hoffman's release at the time. Hoffman had actually also done an interview with Canadian journalist Peter Tadman, where he had admitted and said that he felt no guilt about what he had done, and that he was still seeing the devil in 1992 when the interview took place. But luckily, Hoffman would actually pass away in May 21st of 2004, ending the tragic tale of Shell Lake, as Hoffman now couldn't physically harm anyone ever again. However, he would leave behind a massive scar in the Shell Lake community, and of course a scar left behind for the Peterson family, especially the lone survivor Phyllis Peterson, who was only 4 years old at the time of the incident, and would be put into the custody of her uncle. But there was one more child in the Peterson family that was alive and well, the oldest daughter, Kathy Hill, who was actually married and lived in a nearby town. And this daughter would go on and say that she still had lingering frustrations even till this day over the murders. Over the fact that Hoffman had just been put through electroshock therapy and given medication and then essentially left in custody of only his parents without anyone actually knowing that he harbored violent thoughts and fantasies, and even thought of taking the lives of his own parents at points. She felt that more could have been done, but wasn't done, to prevent Hoffman from ever being able to be given the opportunity to take the lives of her whole family. The remaining Peterson girls have tried to move on and live their lives as best as they can, and had tried to escape the fame that came with being the lone survivors of such an ordeal. But Phyllis and her sister Kathy stayed in the Shell Lake area and decided to live on in the area with their extended family, as most of the people around there had accepted what had happened and moved past the tragedy and the situation, allowing for the family to rest in peace and the daughters and the extended family to heal from their scars. Since that day, the white farmhouse of the Petersons has actually burnt down, and there are no traces pretty much left of it. And once more, the Shell Lake community is a calm and safe place. That was the tale of the Shell Lake crimes. I hope I was able to convey this ordeal in a proper way. And if you want me to cover further crimes that may have occurred, then feel free to subscribe. And of course, if you have any crimes you want me specifically to cover, you can comment them down below. Thank you and goodbye.